You're listening to Zero Distortion with Russ Bates, where real conversations cut through the noise from business and politics to mindset and relationships. No filters, no fluff. Just truth and perspective that matters. Mic on. Let's go.
Welcome to Zero Distortion, the podcast where we cut through the noise. I'm Russ Bates. In this episode, we're talking tariffs. It's a topic that's been making headlines and impacting economies worldwide. So let's back up to last week, April 2nd. President Trump announced a sweeping set of tariffs aimed at reshaping America's trade relationships. This included a universal 10% tariff on all imports, with really significantly higher rates for specific countries, ranging anywhere from 15 to 45%, based on perceived trade imbalances and unfair practices. So the financial markets definitely responded. U.S. stocks lost approximately $6.6 trillion in value, and that marks the largest two-day loss in history. Yesterday, President Trump announced a 90-day pause on most of these newly proposed tariffs. However, tariffs on Chinese imports were significantly increased to 125%, the administration citing China's lack of respect for global markets. It's also important to note that tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada, they weren't paused. The existing 25% tariffs on certain goods from these countries continues to be in effect. So these developments have led to very significant market reactions and raised questions about the future of international trade relations. So we want to take a step back and examine this situation through three critical questions. One, what are tariffs and who pays for them actually? Two, what is the Trump administration aiming to achieve with these tariffs? And then three, if the administration's goals are met, is the outcome actually beneficial? To help us navigate this complex topic, I'm pleased to welcome John Ellis to the show. John is the founder and CEO of Agile Auto. He's an economist, a U.S. Marine veteran, esteemed automotive consultant, executive board member, and NADA certified professional. His extensive experience in the automotive industry and deep understanding of economic policies really makes him pretty uniquely qualified to shed some light on the implication of these tariffs. So, John, welcome to Zero Distortion. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, Russ, thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, it's a complex world right now with the tariffs, and we want to break it down into these three questions. And with your expertise, I think we can really get to some type of conclusion, maybe. Of course, it could change again, but just overall, what's your overall thoughts of the tariffs, how they've been rolled out, how they've been pulled back, and what's just your overall sense of the situation?
Yeah, so my first study of tariffs were with the oil collusion by the Saudis and the Middle East back in college when I was studying international trade and finance, and that was in the mid to early 80s. And this is a much different type of tariff dynamic. So I think we get confused when we hear about collusive tariffs, because we're not talking about collusion here by nations against the U.S., which is what we saw with the manipulation of the oil quality, quantity, and price back in those days. And even since then, the NAFTA agreements and all of that thing, all good intentions. But when you throw all that in a mixed soup pile, it seems really weird that we would be imposing these restrictive tariffs right now. Why don't we want free trade? And why don't we want, to disrupt anything? We're just now kind of seeing some fruits of this new administration's policy. And, at the fundamental core, what tariffs are simply just barriers to trade. And it sounds negative, right? But we're not imposing tariffs. We're leveling the playing field. The problem is tariffs have been imposed on us for a lifetime, at least mine. NAFTA and since the new agreements between Canada and Mexico in Trump's first term were meant to kind of bring some of those free trade agreements to a global pathway for easier commerce between countries. And it did that for a short run, but it manipulated those that we wanted to block. So China, and the others could start using those agreements to circumvent the restrictions that we had on them.
Right.
So what Trump found out in his second term, it seems, and of course I don't sit in the room with him, but reading what I can read, it's just think about the Panama Canal and the way that's been handled, and China almost owned that very recently. We have to reassess the global free trade conditions for the U.S., and that's all that we've done. So once the playing field was addressed and defined by this administration, they want to make it an even playing field. So it's not that we don't want trade. It's not that we don't want their product, and we certainly want to sell our product to them. So we don't like the fact that they're up in the trade barriers through tariffs either. But what we have to do is say we need a level playing field, and until we get that, we have to strong arm you, because you don't want to do it, out of the goodness of your heart. Because if you did, you would have left all of our agreements alone and not circumvented them and bringing China product through Canada, other product through Mexico that help circumvent their trade barriers that you put on us that we have on you directly, right? So it just became a kind of a spaghetti junction. Tariffs are our way of saying, okay, well, we're in a, think about it as a fight. If you're in a fight, you're probably going to stand with the strongest, biggest guy in the room, right? The one that can protect you, protect himself, and help you have a clean, fair fight. That's kind of what Trump has done. He said, okay, well, we're the biggest commerce and we're the biggest producer. So, we're going to strong arm the world until everybody says, I need you more than you need me. So let's get fair. And I promise you, all the reciprocal trades are fairness. He'd like them all go down to zero from what I've read. We don't want tariffs, but at this point, it's probably our only lever that we have to kind of even the playing field.
Got it. So that's a good segue to get into this first question, and that's what are tariffs and who really pays for them? And tariffs, I think that's pretty simple. They're taxes imposed on imported goods, taxes or fines or however you want to put it on these imported goods, and they're typically calculated as a percentage of that item's value, right?
Correct.
And the intention is, and correct me if I'm wrong or you see it different, but it's to make foreign products more expensive, and that encourages consumers to buy more of the domestically produced goods, and that protects the domestic and local industries. Is that kind of how you see it?
It is. And I'll tell you that the way you've described tariffs is the way the rest of the world sees them. So if you think about China, if you think about the EU, France, Venezuela, all the other ones, they imposed tariffs on the U.S. goods in the form of tariffs or currency manipulation. There's many tariffs, quote unquote, type activity that these countries do. So when they say China only has 20% tariffs, well, it's because they manipulate their currency because of their authoritarian and the way they're governed, that they can make their currency so much cheaper that turns into a tariff, right? Because we're more expensive no matter what, because of the way they manipulate their currency in that trade imbalance. But most countries put tariffs on the United States so they can sell their goods and services inside and make it harder for the U.S. to come over. So we built NAFTA and then the later agreements because we don't care about that. We want free trade between all the countries, and we feel like we can compete on quality of good and service, right, and price. But when you tariff us, we can't. So yes, tariffs are a tax, and it's a tax on the consumer if you want to buy outside of the country. If you want to buy
Right.
outside of the country, it doesn't hit you. And so, yes, everybody's saying I've got good friends that are conservative, fiscal conservatives going, this is not what we voted for. This is not the conservative party. We don't believe in taxes. And I would say you're correct, but this can't be viewed as a tax. Even though a definition of tariffs is taxing foreign goods, this has to be viewed as a tax to level the playing field against a tax that's already applied.
So, and that gets into who actually pays for the tariff, because I know I've heard Peter Navarro and Trump and Besson and a lot of these folks saying, yeah, the country that sends these goods over, they're the ones who pay for the tariff. but that's really not how it typically goes. It's whoever is importing will pay for that tariff, that cost. And that's whoever's going to, like a
So
Walmart, for example, or a Best
yeah,
Buy, and then they have to pay that, and they're going to either eat some of that, all of that, or pass some or all of it on to the consumer, correct?
yes, tactically speaking, certainly that's the case. But
Okay.
it is checkers and chess. And let me give you kind of an economic term for this: opportunity cost. So the burden of the cost will eventually fall on the countries that are being tariffed because they're going to lose production, they're going to lose revenue, and then we're going to gain that revenue from them either through the tariff or through selling our own goods and services to our people. So let's just say China says, I'm still going to produce and push all this goods, even though you've tariffed us. Now it's 125%. Well, that we get the revenue, that 125%. So we either gain revenue that way,
Meaning
or
the federal government gains the revenue.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or China says, I can't afford that, I can't compete, so they don't produce as much, and it hurts that economy until they decide, okay, I want zero, you want zero, let's go to zero. So it's either
Okay.
punitive on that for them, or it's a positive for us. Now, the people have to understand the world consumes 80% of our goods. We only consume 20% of the world's goods.
The world the
In
world
a
consumes more of ours.
in a macro environment, the world consumes more from us than we consume from them.
Okay, I thought it would probably be opposite. I thought
It's
that
not.
since we don't manufacture as much in the
Well,
US.
the way they're bringing it in, those kind of things, but we actually get more of our services and our goods production out of the U.S. We don't these countries we don't need. We can live without them at a asset, and there's a credit and a debit better than they can with us, and that's the only power we have. That's
So if
why do you think the EU's coming to us? It's not because we buy so much from them or from Japan or from Venezuela or from Israel that, oh my God, if they stop producing, we won't have what we need in the U.S. It's actually quite the opposite. They were going, oh my God, we need you more than you need us. We know that. We're running to the table.
I would
That's
agree that the let's say China, for example, there's that gets into the trade deficit, right? We buy more from China than they buy from us, which is another one of the arguments they've said is part of the problem. But
that's correct.
do so, whether it's electronics, whether it's textiles, what have you, we're bringing those over from China. So I would think, and maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding was we manufacturing has gone outside of the US for whatever. You can look around your office and your home, you can see there's a lot of stuff that is imported,
Made
right?
in China, yeah.
So my thought was that countries like China, Canada, Mexico, whoever, they're sending more in, and that's a trade deficit, sending more to the US. And that's part of what the administration said wasn't fair with that. But to
Yes.
your point on the cost, ultimately, I mean, let's say on a Chinese product, let's just use whatever imported from China. That consumer here in the U.S. is going to pay for that, and the revenue from that tariff will go to the government, the U.S. government. It's not paid by Chinese their government. It's paid by us, the consumers. So the consumers are in the U.S. are actually paying more, and whether it's short term or whatever, but that's ultimately where it comes, right?
So if you think about how tariffs are imposed, right? They're imposed at when they get here, right? On the ship's land, they go to port, right? They're
Yeah.
tariffed, right? The contents of the good are inspected, right? And those kind of things. And tariffs are imposed. So certainly there is an import-export tax that country will pay. But there's also an increase in the price of those goods once they hit the consumer market that the consumer will have. Well, first of all, the manufacturer will have to play. Whoever assembles that good in the U.S. and then retails that good to the consumer, they'll
Yeah.
have the first hit lick, and they'll decide how much to pass along. But I think what we're doing is we're focusing on the wrong thing. Because I'll say it again: think about Ford, for example. 70% of Ford is built in the US, so they'll have the least impact. The ones that'll have the worst are Jaguar and Land Rover. My point is, and Chevy and Stellantis have plants in the US, and they're starting to ship all their manufacturing back to the US. They don't have to find land. They don't have to find a factory. They may have to retool a little bit. So we're talking 12 to 18 to 24 months max before at their full capacity. Apple's a great example, right? Same thing, right? They can get back here and go back in their same facilities and start producing the iPhone here again. The point is, short-sightedness would say it's a tax on the consumer and they're going to pay more. Well, consumers can buy American goods. We have the goods. It's not that you can't buy a toy here in the US or a piece of clothing or some carpet that isn't manufactured in the US. It's just a little more expensive and it's more boutique because we all of our main manufacturing has gone overseas for the large volume cheap product that we get every day that you say we see in our houses. So in the interim, it may be a small increase or a medium increase in cost of goods here in the US if you want to continue buying that foreign product, right? But the quickness of the ramp up, and that's why I said it's going to be a while, 12, 24, maybe 36 months, will certainly pay instrumental dividends. And it's if we focus on the tax and we focus on the tariff, we're going to hate the policy. If we focus, and that's tactical. If we focus on the strategy and the end game, we're going to love the policy. Look, I don't like to pay more for goods and services. Just like anyone, I don't want to pay more. And I'm okay with getting China product into the US. But it's got to be fair. If you talk to Kevin O'Leary or any of the others, it's a 400 to 500% tax. And that's even if you can produce in China or sell in China. So we are an adversary of China. And yes, our consumers will pay a short-term pain for this, but it's not Trump's fault. It's a globalization. It's a globalization that we've fallen into the trap of over the last, 20 or 30 years to say, laissez-faire. Let's all just have a lot of fun. Don't worry about it. No one's paid attention or even cared, much less had the courage to say, wait a minute, we're being taken advantage of, and eventually our great-grandchildren are going to be in a world of hurt because we're only going to be a service and a financial industry, not a manufacturing industry. And do you know how we won World War II?
Yeah, through manufacturing, and I get it.
Germans had better technology and better munitions than we did. They had better equipment. They should have destroyed us. But because we had manufacturing, Ford was a great leader in this area and could turn that into the product we needed to get over there and in like droves and droves. We beat them with quantity, not quality. We would lose every war that we were in right now if that was the case again. Now that we're not in that era, we don't need all those Sherman tanks anymore. My point is, go back in time with the manufacturing deficit we have now, we would have lost World War II. Sovereignty, national security, financial security is critical. So we're paying the price of the liberal globalist policies of the last 30 years. And look, Republicans are part of that. I'm not going party specific, but it's a liberal policy to say, hey, laissez-faire, open it up. And if y'all want to take advantage of us, we won't care. And it's hurt us. So I hate it. But as an economist, I'm all for it because I care about my children and their children's future of having some kind of sovereignty left as a country.
So the objectives of these tariffs, it sounds like it's leveling the playing field, as you've mentioned, with tariffs and being able to get into these markets that had ways, whether it was tariffs or some other way to keep the U.S. products out of these other countries' markets. That's one, correct?
Yeah, think of currency manipulation. If I make the value of my currency 70% less than it should be, because as a government-run country, I can do that. I can absorb all your tariffs and still be cheaper than you.
Okay.
That's a tariff. So that's why when Kevin O'Leary says, nuh-uh, 400%, people go, he's so stupid. He didn't know what he's talking about. He knows exactly what he's talking about because he's dealt in the currency manipulation world of China. But the average citizen doesn't understand that. So what eventually will happen is the dollar will crash. We almost lost the dollar once already. And if we lose the dollar as a national currency again and they start manipulating the currency because we have nothing to offer. Look, you can't A dollar can't be backed by finance and real estate. A little bit, but it needs manufacturing to be backed. We need to be a manufacturing country to be backed. Otherwise, the dollar will be in jeopardy. And then, who knows what could be the following of that. But if you remember, during the last administration, the Russia stopped buying oil in dollars.
Okay.
That was number one. And then the rest of the country world was starting to follow into suit. When Trump got in office, he said you can't have any more oil until you start buying in dollars again. Guess what they're buying in oil now in?
Buying in dollars,
Dollars.
I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
we lose the dollar. We're in so much debt, we won't have a country anymore.
So what
So this is
you're
not about tariffs and about being fair to other countries. It's about, whoa, we got to get back on some pillars, some standings that we can say, whoa, we can build our country back and be healthy again for our children and our grandchildren. We don't want to own China. We don't want to be evil to Europe. We love Europe. But if they don't love us back, we have to get into a level playing field. And the bleeding hearts and the ones that, protest in the street, what they don't understand is um, people are always in it for their own good. China's in it for China. Europe's in it for Europe. France is in it for France. Venezuela, Japan, India. So we have to be in it for us too. And this is how we're being in it for us. Everybody's in it for themselves. And eventually, when we're all level, we can say, okay, now we can play in the sandbox and all not and be happy.
so I want to talk about the manufacturing piece because it's fair trade, and there's a lot of things that go into fair trade, right? You mentioned the currency manipulation, the tariffs, the trade offsets, unbalanced trade, and that's all stuff I want to talk about too. But with the domestic manufacturing, so it's left the U.S. The U.S. is primarily a service-based country, right? There's still
Financial
manufacturing.
services, some real estate, and some manufacturing. Sure.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Let's use the iPhone as an example because I've heard that one said several times. It's made in China, and it's not just made in one place in China. It's like all over the place in China. I've seen a map that showed a bunch, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just going on reports I've seen. But an iPhone now costs what? Is it you can usually get them for like $800 on a plan, but I think they're like $1,000 or 1,200.
Mhm.
But I think who was it? Lutnick said we're going to have manufacturing of the iPhone here in the U.S. People putting these little screws in and doing that. What what I'm hearing is that iPhone, instead of costing 1,000 or 1,200, is going to be at least three times the price because it's manufactured in the U.S. So what does that make sense to us? And that's just one example, but if the price goes to three times as much, um how many people are going to be buying that iPhone at the time?
Yeah, I love it. These are great examples because it's the average consumer hearing this getting scared. So let me tell you how this works. At least how it's seen, what the research I've done, of course, being in this field for so many years, technology follows labor. So what happened was when we let manufacturing offshore to go find cheaper labor, and we hear it Nike, like slave labor, whatever you want to call it, right? The cheap labor where people can't even live. They're living in slave houses or wherever they're doing, and then that good comes back 10 times cheaper. We don't care, all good. So taking that completely out of the equation, that's how that happened. Like all these manufacturing companies saw, I can do it 50% cheaper over there. The labor's cheap, and then I'll bring it back. It's worth the move. So the reason they didn't come back under other administrations was number one, regulations. We know that. So now the regulations are cut. We want you back. We're going to bring you back, and you're going to get the sweetheart deal when you build and so on and so forth. So that's one. Regulation keeps them over there is one of the reasons. But taking the iPhone, for example. So they're using that cheap labor, to your point, to do the little screws. They're paying them a penny an hour, whatever it is. And of course, I'm exaggerating, but it's not a livable wage. We don't like that. We don't want that for them, and you don't want that for them. But we want the iPhone, and it's our iPhone. We built the technology. Steve Jobs is a U.S. citizen. He built the company in the U.S. That's our product, and we've let all of that technology over there, which is unsafe for one. But for two is, um, to your point, there's record profits for Apple because of that. It's not like they're going, oh, I can barely make the phone. So don't be bleeding heart. If it's 3,000 here, it would only be because they want their 80% profit margin because of the slave labor they're using over there. But the second thing is, let's just take example that everything I've said doesn't matter. But because what you said was a tactical question, it's going to be 3,000, not 1,000. What are we going to do? It's not going to be 3,000. What's going to happen is Apple's going to come back over here, and just like they've done with everything else, they're going to use AI and robotics to build those phones, not 7-year-old children with little bitty fingers and screwdrivers.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree. I think that
so
automation is going to be a big piece of it. So you're
it's here
saying the
today.
automation will offset those costs that they're saying
And profit.
and cutting profit too.
Look, supply and demand competition, right? I mean, if I can take my company, and I own a few, and move to China and make a 70-50% margin over what I make today, it's very attractive,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Survivability, profitability. But is that really good for the product, the consumer, and the country? No. But just like I said a minute ago, we're all in it for our inherently human nature is be in it for yourself. China's
Yeah.
a dictatorship. Russia's a dictatorship. Do we want the iPhone in China?
Right.
But again, to take all that away, when they come back to the US because it's the best fertile ground to continue manufacturing now that the barriers of trade are up, Apple's going to find a way to keep those margins and get the consumer price down where it needs to be so they can continue the volume.
So
And
you're
there's
saying they'll innovate in order to keep that cost somewhat attractive, maybe not as low as it was in China being produced there, but something else, and the automation and maybe a cut in that profit margin or something is what you're
yeah,
saying.
manufacturing efficiencies, and of course, maybe not an 80% growth in margin, but a 40%. And there's a great example of that. How in
Well,
the
before you get
world?
to that, let me ask one more thing before we
Yeah,
get off the automation piece. So
it
that's
was
something
gonna,
else I'm hearing about the manufacturing is it's going to bring all these jobs to the US. And what I'm hearing you say, and I agree, it really won't. Will it have a few jobs? Yeah, but mostly everything's going to be automated. It's not going to be like a Henry Ford assembly line back in the day. This is going to be, just a few jobs that people will have in manufacturing. Would you agree with that?
okay, so I was going to give you an example of the technology and manufacturing. So it'd be Tesla, right?
Okay.
How does a one-man privately owned company, compete and build a big three company? You're not supposed to, because the profits of the manufacturing are never made in the first 10 years. They always come as at the loyalty band when when that new manufactured product gets turned, which would be your service, repeat business, warranty work, all the things, the lease, all that stuff. So the first 3 to 5 years, it's always like you're never going to make it. Try building a car company today, you'll go bankrupt, which is what he was
Yeah,
told.
Tesla had a
Oh,
lot of backing from the federal government, right?
they
Back in the
did.
day.
They did, but they paid their loans early with penalty and interest for doing so. They were profitable early.
Yeah, but now I mean I don't think those options are around for any new innovators, or it
I
doesn't
would
seem to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I beg to differ. I think Trump would open up the coffers for anybody who want to build a manufacturing innovation in the U.S. But here nor there, what we're saying is automation works, but the point is they have tens of thousands of employees as well, manufacturing in Tesla. Let's get back to your question. The middle class. How is that going to be helped by bringing manufacturing back if a lot of it's going to be robotic? And I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
where are these jobs? I'm not saying there won't be any jobs. I certainly there would be, but how many jobs and are they going to be good jobs? I think there would be some pretty good jobs.
Hmm.
I remember I back in my days as an electrician, we built a Toyota plant in southern Indiana, and the weld shop was all automated. This was in the mid late 90s, and that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So there were some people, but you really didn't see too many people walking around that plant.
Yeah. So this has been around. I was going to say this has been around for years. So thinking about automotive manufacturing, it's a supply chain where all the jobs are built, right? So all of our parts and supply chain is still overseas too, not just the manufacturing. So when we bring the manufacturing nuts and bolts and things like that, there's a lot of hands in that kind of small supply manufacturing that goes into the automation process that gets done. But the flip side of that is all of this automation that we see in the plants that you build and then these manufacturing that'll be retooled in the US to kind of retrofit to that new process. There's probably a small reduction, maybe 30% of manual labor, but you still need all the support around that, right? Robotics needs support. You were one of the ones supporting that, retooling the robotics, retooling the line, and then of course, I want to say the last thing I heard was like only 40 to 50% of the vehicle is robotically made. There are human hands that have to be involved in that robotic process. So any of those jobs are going to be a plus because they're a minus now. And then what those jobs support, which would be increased VOTEC education and training. So will we not have people turning a wrench? Yes. I don't see any more major wrench turning operations to learn how to turn a wrench, but I do see how to work on the robot, how to build the robot, how to configure the software that gets the robot doing the right thing, how to maintenance that product. And so the jobs just move to more technical and not more laborious, which is good for our economy, but they're not here. If all the big manufacturing companies are over there, all that's being done over there. So maybe we won't bring the individual welder back, right? But we'll bring the people back that the VOTEC community and the VOTEC industry will service and grow. And man, that's a big plus for us. But right now, all of those jobs are not here. So what do we do? I mean, those are the
Yeah.
people that say, I can't find a job, or I don't want to go work in agriculture, right? Which is where you need human hands in a lot of places, right? Or need work. So
Yeah,
it's a
who's
plus.
gonna, I guess, kind of asking on this point, who's gonna want to do those jobs? I come from the building trades, and you know, gosh, I'm over 30 years in. I got in like 94. Tells you how old I am. So back in the day, I mean, it was a proud trade to be in. Times have changed. I mean, there's so many people on these, and everybody wants to be a YouTuber and things like that. I'm not saying there won't be people that do it, but are we going to have enough? Are we going to have enough people that want to get into those types of careers? And will they actually be high paying careers? And will that high paying career, those jobs, translate into again higher prices for consumers? I'm wondering if the standard of living of the U.S. Citizen is ultimately gonna drop a little bit because we're buying more here in the U.S., but maybe we can't get as much as we normally would. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying, is that a possible outcome of this if everything goes according to plan with the
Yeah.
Trump tariffs?
Yeah, I think we're going down a rabbit hole. I'll tell you, I have a completely different view. My oldest son is an API inspector in the oil field, and he didn't go to college, and he makes more money than my middle son, who did go to college, and has an
Mhm.
advanced, a good degree in an advanced field. So
Yeah.
skilled labor, technical labor, certified labor is very high paying. Second, because these Harvard grads and these Yale grads and Stanford grads in arts and studied Zimbabwe language translations and things like that. They don't make any money unless they go to a think tank. That college degrees and advanced educational systems do not pay guarantee you the money you're looking for. These technical jobs are really well paying jobs, but I think we're getting down a rabbit hole because the goal of the current trade environment is to create free trade, not to take everything away from foreign countries and buy and sell everything in the U.S. That won't be the end goal. 75 countries have already come to the U.S. saying, "Hey, I'm ready to negotiate." The only one that gave us the finger is China, the real
Hmm.
big one. Now, look, EU said they had something on the table for reciprocal, but that was before Trump said, "Okay, if you haven't stated you're going to tariff us back, I'm going to pause you for another 90 days." So he's playing the chess, not checkers, because what's happening is he's trying to rally the world against China.
Well, and let me ask you this too. I get the goals. are there different ways to go about it that may not alienate the entire globe? I talk to people across the world, and the reputation of the U.S. isn't great right now. We're kind of looked at as bullies, and instead of like, hey, let's talk about this and maybe have an actual plan, it just seems to be kind of thrown out, pulled back, thrown back out, pulled in. It doesn't. It's pretty. I don't know. I'll say nonsensical to me. I understand what the overall goal is, I think, and I've seen Navarro say this, and then he'll point over here, and it's kind of a spaghetti of what they're saying the intent is. But let's say the intents that we were talking about of these tariffs make sense. Is this the best way to go about it? It seems like
Personally,
we've really alienated like Canada. I mean, what's Canada done against us other than support us? So,
so,
I don't
yeah, so
know.
can so Canada's allowed China product to come over for years without us paying any attention or caring. And we're so it's taken away the leverage that we put on intentionally on China.
So you're
Canada
saying
had
things come in from China to Canada, and Canada just sends them straight in.
they
Like
use the
what?
agreement they use the agreements we made. Manufacturing, a lot of manufactured product, right? But the point is, I think okay. So let's say the world is mad at the U.S. I love that because I do agree with you, and I do agree it looks like a temper tantrum on the
Yeah, I
U.S.'s
mean
part.
the
I
90-day
agree.
pause was brought up on Monday, and they said fake news never going to happen. 2 days later, when the markets continue to go down, it's like, okay, hey, 90-day pause, and this was all part of the plan. And it doesn't seem like this is some chess match. I don't know. It doesn't. It seems more like Hangman. It doesn't seem to make sense to
So
me.
Barbara on the deal, what is it? Cuban and all them that show. Where you pitch your
Shark
product and try.
Tank.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Barbara tells a story of Trump. She said, "I walked." She goes, "I've never met a man more brilliant and more strategic in my entire life, and he makes you think he's dumb." And she told a story about that when the Chinese came over to buy real estate in New York, and Trump was almost in bankruptcy, and she thought he's got to sell this building. He's got to sell this building. He's going to go out of business. Chinese are coming to buy this building. If he doesn't focus all his attention on selling this building, he's going to be bankrupt and go out of business. She said we were in a 4-hour meeting. He never talked about the building, and they bought the whole damn waterway and paid him hundreds of millions of dollars and never lost his building. They came to buy the building.
And he didn't sell the building. He sold them something else. Okay.
Trump is the smartest man that she ever met. This is a billionaire woman. We are dummies down here. Me and you and everybody else is throwing temper tantrums. The Canada, US, we have no idea the intelligence, the economic numbers inside what he sees over the last decades that we don't get to see. What these countries have done to the US, what they've done to manipulate our currency, what they've done to
So
put
is the juice
themselves
worth the squeeze if everybody's upset with the U.S. and they remember it down the road? And
when the fruits of the labor produce positive outcomes and they get impacted by the positive outcomes, which they will, they'll go, oh, this is great. This is what I didn't see this happening. Now listen,
so you're saying Trump sees.
I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you I'm not near as smart as him and he is and the people around him. And I do know the fundamental tenets of economic health. We don't have them. The
So
US doesn't
part of
have
the
them.
economic health is, and for businesses, is being able to have stability and be able to forecast and that.
Mhm.
And it seems like there's none of that. I know the markets react whenever he does whatever, but I'm still hearing a lot of CEOs saying we don't know what to really do because he said that today, but 2 days ago or Monday he said they wouldn't pause the tariffs. So is
So
that
that's a great question. Let me tell you what's the hardest pitcher to hit?
what's that?
So think of baseball. If you're facing a pitcher, who's the hardest one to hit?
Geez, I don't know.
The inconsistent one that throws strikes, but not every strike. High, low, corner, ball, strike, ball. You never know where the pitch is. And that pitcher will keep you guessing at every at bat. Now, if I throw you a low and outside as my number one pitch and a high and inside as my strikeout pitch, eventually you're going to figure that one out, and then you're going to start bombing me. That's
So
chess, not checkers. Best pitchers in the world, and Maddox was one, would throw more balls and strikes on purpose and
yeah,
make you
yeah,
think
Maddox had great control,
he
but
would
I
make you
guess
think that he
the
doesn't know
U.S.
what he's doing.
economy, to me, the U.S. economy is the one batting and Trump's pitching, and
No,
he
it's the
reminds me
world.
more of Wild Thing from the Phillies because, again, how do you trust what he says? If he says one thing, no, these tariffs are forever. We're not going to pause them. We're not going to do anything, and then he does the exact opposite the next day.
because
How
it's
does anybody
signaling.
believe what he says?
Yeah, it's just signaling. It's negotiating, signaling. And anytime you negotiate with people that are adversarial, and buddy, I'm telling you, the world is adversarial. If you don't believe it, go and see. Go to
No,
France.
I've been,
10 years
yeah,
ago
I've
before
traveled the
Trump.
globe. I get that. I'm saying for us as Americans, what
Yeah.
are we supposed
Well,
to
what if
think? Especially
what
if
if
you've got a business like you or I, it's
yeah,
like, all right, how do I plan to do this or that when there's no stability whatsoever?
I've got stability. Well, I mean, if you're talking about the stock market,
No,
is
I'm
our
not talking about
indication of
stock market. Like
instability.
I'm in clean energy, for example.
Yeah,
So, for let's talk batteries and stuff. All right, what
yeah,
we plan a project, how are we going to know? Because there's a lot of stuff that does come from outside the US because there's no
yeah,
supply chain here yet.
hmm,
Not much of one.
yeah.
How do you plan? Do you put a price in on a project and then all of a sudden tariffs come in and that changes everything? It's going to hurt that client as well. That slowed down a lot of stuff
Yeah.
in just the sector I'm in, and I'm sure a lot of other people are experiencing this too.
Yeah, so think about clean energy. I'm in that business as well, not as heavily invested as you. But I'll tell you, we never had a chance in that space. And until we get to a level playing field with China where there's zero to zero tariffs, you're never going to have a stable mineral supply chain for what you're trying to accomplish in the grand scheme of things. And this I did study. And so I know that our ability to negotiate with Ukraine to have the minerals deal, there's a reason for that because we were about to be owned by China in clean energy. And
I'd
buddy,
say China already owns us in clean energy.
I'm
They're
just talking about the future of clean energy. Not today. Today it doesn't matter because there's plenty of oil and gas. But as our government was restricting oil and gas production and they were killing permits, they were making us more and more dependent on China for the future of our energy sovereignty. And buddy, I'm going to tell you right now, if you didn't think it was important what we're doing today, China, we would be speaking Chinese in 50 years because we would need them so bad because we don't have the minerals under our earth like they do. So at this point, drill, baby, drill, like Elon says, keep our economy going, find the partnerships that we can get to get the minerals that we need so we're not dependent on a communist nation that kills their people for dissent. Right now, you're telling me let's play nice with China because I'm in clean energy and they're killing us and we need them.
no, I'm
And let
not
me just,
saying we play nice with them. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, there needs to be some things that are different. China's got a reputation. I understand that.
do you
I've
remember the
dealt with them
drones?
myself.
Remember the
So
drones?
yeah, I mean, I get that they're not the best player.
It's not they're not the best. They want to take over the US. If you don't believe me, talk to smarter people than me. They want to dominate the globe, be the superpower of the globe, and then put us in our place. We're the evil empire. They call us that. So
Sure,
I'm telling you,
sure.
buddy, we have to impose the tariffs, get them knocked down a few notches, bring them back to the negotiating table, build a trade alliance that works that they have to stick to, or we'll go back and forth. And right now, what Trump does is scare people, and I'm never pulling the tariffs back as a scare tactic, right? What happened when he did that? 75 countries came to the table. Without that definitive line in the sand, they wouldn't come to the table. Then he said, okay, I, I'll see this. All right, I'm going to give you guys a reprieve to see if you're telling me the truth.
So
If you're really coming,
did he change his mind on his strategy or
I don't think so. I think all along he's playing chess and we're playing checkers. Remember, the Chinese coming to save his butt, buying one building, and he sold them the entire waterway for 3 times more than it was worth and kept his building.
so why
Barbara said, how in the hell? And she talked to him. I goes, I was never selling my building. She goes, but I'm here. Wait a minute. you're lied to me, or did you just change your mind? No, he goes, Barbara, this is a much bigger play than you know. This is for New York skyline. This isn't for my building. I wasn't worried about going into bankruptcy. You guys think he's worried about something he's not worried about. How France views it.
Well,
Trump is 4 steps ahead of us. And I've
let
only
me
got a
ask you
couple more
this,
minutes,
because
but
yeah, let
yeah.
me ask you this real quick, and we'll cut her off. But if I'm hearing China is the big threat, and I don't disagree. There's a big problem there. Why didn't he just say, all right, we're going to deal with you, China, and do tariffs on them? And then why you just said he sold the skyline of New York to China a few years ago. Why? I
Not a few
mean,
years
that seems
ago,
counter.
30 years ago, not at 40 years ago, not a few years ago, and it wasn't the same day. Times
Okay.
change. Now
Okay.
listen, I'll tell you this. Um, every country's abused us, and he saw that, just not like China, but he needed an alliance. He's building an alliance. But to build an
How's he building an
alliance,
alliance if
but I just said
everybody's
75
against us?
75 countries coming to the table. He needs a trade alliance, and they need us more than we need them. So once he builds the trade alliance, we don't care if people like us. If you cared if people liked you, Russ, you'd be out of business tomorrow. I'm going to
Yeah,
tell
it's
you what
it's not
you
like,
want to
it's more
build.
respect. I'm looking at, if, and I can't say, if you're looking at respect through fear, that to me that's not respect. If
He's
I'm
not.
scared
He's
of
not.
somebody, that doesn't mean I respect them.
But remember, he's bartering on the behalf of the U.S. It's not about respecting or liking Trump. He sees what you and I don't see, where we're headed. If we just stayed on the path we were on, we would have hit an inflationary, currency manipulated wall, and we would be in trouble in 25 to 30 years. I'd tell my children not to have children. We couldn't have sustained the government jobs outpacing the private sector jobs, the bloated government and stimulus package that had our inflation going through the roof, and all the Fed manipulation that was going on just to make us look better in the stock market than we really were. And he just stopped it all like a freight train stopped on a track, and it's hurting everybody's feelings. I get it. But he doesn't care about any of that, how you care like me, if I'm respected. What he wants is to make it better for everybody, including the US. He does care about France, Europe. I don't know if he cares about China because they're so bad over there, bad actors. But my point is, he wants those 75 countries to win. And he knows how to make everybody win. Just like Barbara didn't know how to win, he taught her, a billionaire real estate investor, this is how we all win. And she got better because all of that New Deal was hers as well. She's like, holy crap. So the smartest people in the world think Trump's the smartest person that they know. So we have to give him some time to do what he does. Even
How
so,
much time do we give him with this? I hear
I would
people say
say,
we've got to give him time. What if you had to look at a calendar and say, here's the time I'm giving him? I heard Dave Portnoy the other day said he'll give him some time, but he's not giving him forever. What, John
no, yeah,
Ellis, what is
certainly.
your time frame that you're saying, hey, if this doesn't turn around, and things go the way he's talking about, then this wasn't a good idea? What's your
So
time
what's
frame?
gonna happen is he's gonna keep pivoting, and you guys are gonna, people are gonna say he didn't know what he was doing. Look, he's backtracking. Look, he changed the line in the sand. He's already three steps ahead. He knows what his three pivots ahead already are. Now, I think we're going to see a significant impact in our health in the next 24 months. And by the time he leaves office, first of all, by the time he leaves office, we're going to elect another conservative that wants to continue his job because that's how we're going to be able to. Manufacturing will be back, the plants will be retooled, production will be in the US the way we wanted it to all along. And all people are going to go, wait a minute. Okay. Think about this. 100, what was it? $100 trillion. I don't know what the number of investments, from Apple to Sony to, all these, some of our clean energy companies are coming over to the US. How much investment has he gotten already? And this is only in the first 6 months or 4 months. By the time he's leaving office, we're going to see a manufacturing explosion in the U.S. from these foreign countries coming over here, including our countries, to the point where, to your point, well, you can't sustain U.S. by U.S. alone. Yeah, but Nokia's here, and Apple's here, and Onyx is here, and they all came because no regulation, no taxes, free trade with all these 75 countries that you love, and yeah, you can deal with China on your own, right? And keep doing what you're doing with China. But open borders with us because you're part of this alliance. You wait and see. I think 2 years we'll see a significant impact. We're already starting to see a lift in employment and wage growth, those kind of things. More private sector jobs in the last 3 months than were ever created. Everything last year was public sector, 80% public, 20% private sector. Now it's flipped, and it started in February. So I think all the tenets of a fundamental foundation are coming together. It's just going to hurt for a little while. It's like turning the Titanic. Take our medicine. You and I didn't do this, but we're going to feel the pain. But I'm okay with that because I can think 3 to 5 years down the road about my children, not about my income today, my tax burden today, or my liabilities today. I'm thinking about my children's ability to be an American and live, free, sovereign, and productive.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And sounds like you're a fan of what's happening, and you're
I
going to give
am.
it some time and see what transpires. I think others, to use your Titanic reference, are feeling, yeah, we are on the Titanic, and it feels like we're being steered toward and that iceberg directly. But hey, time will tell. We'll see what happens, right? So, John,
Good.
hey, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the pod. We'll get this thing out. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all those kind of things. So we'll get it out
I
there,
love
and really
I loved it,
appreciate your
Russ.
time.
I know it got a little contentious for a minute, but you're
No, no,
great.
no, it's good.
I love what you're doing, and it's good to have competing views because listen,
Yeah,
nobody's exactly 100% right. I don't have a crystal ball. I can only lean on my fundamental tenets that I've studied in economics, kind of what I'm reading, but I'm not in those war rooms, and neither
yeah,
are you.
no,
So I can only trust that what I've heard from experts about Trump is right. I can only trust that they have the data and the insights and are using them correctly to forecast the future for us. And I do. So maybe some others don't, and that's okay because at the end, time will tell. History will tell. So we'll
yeah.
see. But I feel like we're on a good path. I hope I've convinced a few people here to think about it a little differently. If not, they don't have to change their mind. I don't expect
Well,
that.
hey, that's what this is about, to have these viewpoints that everybody can check out and agree or disagree, but
Yeah.
mostly, think about it, think it through a little bit, and give it that thought. John, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate your time.
Same here, my friend. I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right, you do the same. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Zero Distortion. If you liked this episode, follow the pod, leave a rating, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You'll find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Stay curious, stay open, and until next time, keep cutting through the noise.